Hi, Alexandra, and welcome to the Natural Birth Podcast. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Excited to be here.
Excited to have you. So, you're one of my beautiful mentees in the Sacred Birthworker Mentorship, and I've actually not heard your birth story. And so, I mean, I know snippets, but it's going to be really interesting, I think, to actually hear your full birth story from start to finish. I'm really curious. So, take us back to, becoming pregnant. Was that, a conscious decision, or was it, oh, hello, life wanting to happen through me? What was it for you?
Yeah, it wasn't a conscious conception necessarily, but my spirit baby was calling to me for some time and I could actually feel this pressure, little spirit trying to come through. So it was on my mind and I was just kind of preparing for motherhood and pregnancy with doing learning about birth and everything. I did a doula course maybe the year before I fell pregnant. And yeah, so I was just kind of gaining knowledge ever since then and building up to it, but not conscious per se conception.
Oh,
Mhm.
that's curious. So you actually became a doula before you became pregnant.
Mhm.
So that was kind of like lurking in the back of your mind that birth work is something I want to do. Where does that come from?
I mean, I was present at when I was 3.5, I was at my brother's birth at home. And then when I was 13, I was at my other's brother's birth. That was like home birth to hospital transfer. So I've just, birth has been a little bit in my field of awareness. But I had a pregnancy loss. And that was like, I don't know, that opened the door to me like feeling my spirit baby after that. I was like, oh, she's ready to come. And then that spurred me into birth work. And I love that, in the mentorship, some learning some of Jane Hardwick Collins lessons and how she says that every birth, whether it's, early and a loss, every you birth something every time. And that is what I feel like I birthed that with that initial pregnancy was the interest in birth work.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful. So when was your loss?
In uh, early part of the year in 2019.
Okay. And then you dove into doula work and then you became pregnant. So it doesn't sound like it was a big whoopsie daisy. It was somehow kind of
Yeah,
it,
definitely.
right? It doesn't sound like it was totally out of the blue that you became pregnant.
No, and it was like, a little bit of this kind of being called and drawn to that path and motherhood while also trying to cling on to maiden too. So it was this very like push pull kind of tuggy internal conflict within me because I was like,
Mhm.
wanted this on this like deep primal level and then was also like maiden is so fun and I'm dancing and doing all these things with my life that are carefree.
Right. And how old were you when you became pregnant with your baby? With this one?
29.
Sorry, what?
29.
29.
29. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful.
So like a year after my doula course, kind of the following
Yeah,
year. Yeah.
beautiful. So let's dive on into that, becoming pregnant and your decision to home birth. Was that really obvious for you?
Yeah, I mean that doula course. So I kind of, my brother's birth when I was 13. It was a very hard birth, transferred. It's a very rural area, so it was like a 2-hour drive to the hospital. And that he came out in distress and just like it was traumatic. Um and so I kind of went away from that experience being like, why would you ever not birth in the hospital in case you need it? And so I had this carried this fear with me. And then I did this doula training and then it opened my eyes to the flaws in the medical system and the overuse of interventions and the classic cascade of interventions. And then I was like, oh whoa, why would you ever birth in the hospital? Two extremes. There's a happy medium. But um yeah, so that really was like, I was like, oh no way. I'm definitely not birthing in the hospital. Um Yeah, I was working with a birth center and I live so far south that they wouldn't come and do a home birth, which I ended up part of my most of my labor was at home, but yeah, so I was actually, birthed at a birth center.
Right, yes, I forgot. In
Yeah.
my head you had a home birth, but I guess you had, yes. I'm not gonna tell your story here, but yes, I have memories of you telling stuff from your home. So, okay, so let's dive on into that. I mean, as a side note here, it's just such a shame, isn't it, how home birth is not easily accessible for all women who desire to have a midwife present, which was the case for you, that you just lived in an area where there's no home birth midwives. And yeah, I think it's just such a shame, and I really hope that we will see a shift in this, because it used to be, right? Your area actually used to have a lot of home birth midwives, and that's the case for a lot of places around the world. But because of politics, about, the need for control from, the higher powers to be, and all of this, and insurance is also playing a part, and just all these
Yeah.
regulations that are trying to quote unquote protect women and babies, are actually taking away choices and actually causing danger. I mean, it's creating also that women are birthing in cars on the way, on the side of the road and stuff like this. And how is that safer than having your own midwife in your home? It does not logic, is it?
Yeah, it's sad. I want those options. There was like a local hospital kind of down here that did births or kind of, would support births back then too. And it's not, they don't have a birth area anymore as well. But yeah, it's like I was born in a hospital birth suite, but everyone else my age and my brothers, it was home birth, and it was like everyone I went to school with had the same midwife. We all, so yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. So, okay, let's dive on into your birth story then. Do you want to tell us about, kind of, did you have any early signs of labor approaching for you?
Yeah, not too much. I guess like, there's one time there was something sticky stuck to the floor, and it was, in the weeks before being full term. And I was on my hands and knees scrubbing this stuff off the floor, and I started having more solid contractions. I'm like, okay, never mind, I can't do that, I guess. I'm like, oh yeah, that trick does work. Get on your hands and knees and scrub the floor. Um yeah, so there was like, a little bit of that, but not too much early labor signs at all. And so with being, birthing at a birth center 2 hours north of my home, I had like an Airbnb for, a long period, like a 3-week period of Airbnb. And I was intending actually to birth at the Airbnb, like a home away from home birth, just sneakily was my intention. And so the first Airbnb we had in this house, it was like, I mean, it had this gorgeous garden and this outside bath with a jasmine plant hanging over it. And so that part was really magical. And then this house was like uneven, like peaked like this. You could roll a ball down it. And so the beds were like uneven. And so I like 4 nights I just slept terribly, and like we slept on all the beds in like every configuration with our heads in different spots. And I was like, this is a funky little cabin. Like there's no way I'm giving birth here. If I go into labor, like I'll just birth at the birth center was my plan. And so we had that one for like 5 days. And then I had this day on May 1st where I was in the middle of two of the Airbnbs. Didn't like have one for half of a day. Just hoping that wouldn't be when I had my baby. But yeah, so like really bad sleep, which probably was, kind of getting ready for labor. And then, the days leading up, kind of some period type cramping. And I think like a day or maybe 2 days before I had my daughter, I had an appointment with the midwives, and it was the one like check I had. And I was 1 centimeter dilated, 30% effaced, or maybe 40, 30, I think, and soft like butter cervix. So, I knew it was getting ready. Um, and then I think that night I had a bloody show, which I kind of ponder if it was because I got checked and had something
Yeah.
poopy.
Yeah, this whole checking before labor, I'm really against that. Doesn't tell us anything. You can literally be like walking around 3 centimeters. I mean, women can walk around 5 centimeters. And if you were be like if you were in active labor and you were 5 centimeters, people go like, oh yeah, you're doing great, whatever. But you could be like having nothing and
Yeah.
being like it really doesn't tell us much. And it's just personally, I just think it's such an intimate, invasive thing to do to a woman without a medical reason, you know?
Yeah, and I loved my midwives, but it was just like, you want to check, kind of like, you want these things and stuff. It's like, yeah, it's your choice. But yeah, I mean, now the knowledge and awareness I have now, I wouldn't get any checks, period. Um, yeah, so I had that one check, and oh, I was very much like, I want to go home. Like, I want to go home for a night. I want to go spend the night at home. They're like, okay, you can do that, but like, you might have to come up in the middle of the night. And I just like had this strong, like, I just want to go sleep in my bed. I just want to go sleep in my bed at home. And I think that night and the last night there, I was having contractions through the night. Like I would wake up from a contraction and have to go pee. And I would have to like wait till the contraction was over to get up and go to the bathroom. And so I was like doing this through the night, but it was like pretty mellow and not, it wasn't that intense, but it was waking me up and then enough that I had to wait till it was over to move. So, you know, and so that was going on through the night. And then I was up at like 4:30 a.m., just up. And then no more contractions once I got up. And I will say too, leading up to these days, we were up there and my partner was surfing and there was this place that had these crazy, crazy stairs, like all sort like really, really like this whole cliff. So I'm like full belly doing these stairs, which probably, helped things along. Um, yeah, so then that day, and it was like the last day of this Airbnb, and we decided to go home for the night. And yeah, nothing in that day. And I go home that night and just happy to be home. And my girlfriend's there house sitting and watching our dog. And my mom and family come up and visit. And I'm definitely like a little bit like it's getting like late, like, 9, almost 10. I'm like, okay, well, I need to go to bed and stuff. Like we're gonna go back up north the next day. And yeah, and then I'm go to the bathroom before bed and just so excited to go sleep in my bed. And then I get up and I'm walking from the bathroom right down the hall into my bedroom. And she kicks off the top of my uterus, like so distinct. Kick, kick, wiggle, 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 and then push into my cervix, like this crazy feeling, so surreal, like very distinct. Push, push, kick, like cool, I'm comfortable, we're at home, this is where I want to be. Bam, it's go time. And then I go to my bed, and then first contraction. It's like pretty intense. 10:48 p.m. And I was so tired. I've been up since like 4:30 a.m. I just wanted to sleep so bad. And I'm like, it's just gonna slow start and I should be able to sleep and everything. And so like I try laying in bed, and it was when I was laying down in bed that I was writhing in pain from the contractions, which it just started off pretty solid and strong. And yeah, and then I got all like, wow, this is why women need epidurals in hospitals because it is painful to just be laying down in a bed birthing. And like, that's not going to work. And I tried for a little while and just like, it's going to go away and I can rest in between. And then I just had to be like, okay, well, this is happening. This is intense. And so I got up and I was on a rug outside the bathroom, laying down on it in between contractions. And then a contraction would happen and I'm swaying back and forth on my hands and knees. And yeah, it didn't slow down at all. Um, yeah, I think I was definitely kind of in denial about it for a little while, for a chunk of time, because it's like I'm at home, I'm 2 hours away from my birthing place, and I'm really tired. I just want to go to sleep. And yeah, and then I just spent time between the toilet and on this rug and hands and knees for a while. And yeah, so I timed contractions for like the first hour of it, which they were kind of fluctuating, but within this like 6 to 15 minute kind of range. Um, and then after an hour, I was like, okay, I can't pay attention to this anymore. I'm done with that. And yeah, a lot of time, just like the rug, swaying back and forth on my hands and knees in the toilet in this little mix. And some point I was, in contact with the midwives, and it was like the one that was on call. I wish I had called my main midwife to like talk to her and stuff, who I trusted more. And just there was I don't know. So I'm this mix of like I'm a private person. Like it was nighttime. I didn't wake anybody up. I was just like alone in the dark doing this. And that's kind of how I do life. I'm like, I'm fine. I got it. I'll do it on my own. So there's like a mix of that and then a little mix of like the good girl not wanting to disturb anybody else. Midwives, my partner, my friend. So this mix of both these things. Um and then it wasn't like a midwife, I liked her, but it wasn't one I was super connected with. So, I don't know, just our rapport and listen, her advice kind of thing. It was a little interesting. And then, yeah, the like having to decide what to do and make that decision and kind of pull you out of just focusing and being in birthland. It definitely was this little like stress factor and kind of like anxiety and also like I didn't want to leave my home. I wanted to stay at my house. It's like where my baby wanted to be born. And then when it was getting more intense, I was in the shower a lot, and then of course there's like, we have no bathtub in my house and I didn't have the rental pool yet. I mean, not that I was planning to birth there. So I was just in this like really big, beautiful shower, but just kind of like crouched on the floor with it kind of on my back. And my contractions were very like, they weren't how I expected them to be. I expected the sensations to be in my belly more, and it originated from my back, and it would wrap around to the front of my belly, and that's how it was the entire time. And it was more focused in the back sensations.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but very like,
It's
yeah.
interesting. Do you know if your baby was posterior?
I don't really know. I mean, I
Uh,
think on my notes it said she came out, but she could have done all little dance. Like I didn't have any.
Absolutely. Yeah, most posterior babies will turn in labor. But then
Uh-huh.
also, it's interesting that just because you have back labor or that sensation doesn't mean also, though, that it is posterior always.
Oh.
There's, different ways with patterns and stuff you could see potentially if it's a posterior baby, but it can also be just like the way your womb is positioned.
Mm, mm. Yeah, because I'm very curious about this and like I don't have the answers. I didn't have any care while I was in labor. I was just by myself, I was on my own.
Sure.
Yeah, I know. I wonder because I think is said to come out the normal way babies come out, that position when she emerged. Um,
Mm.
yeah, so those are my sensations. And it was, it wasn't like how often if they're positioned that way, labor sometimes progresses more slowly.
Mm.
Right. It, definitely wasn't slow progression. It was just like steady, solid, intense, and like gaining intensity. And yeah, so I spent some time in the shower and just this little dance between like shower and the toilet, like a lot of time on the toilets, just purging everything for hours. Um, Yeah, and then at one point I wanted to be in like a tub so bad. And so I start trying to fill up this like it's really funny. This like okay, like this big, this bin. It's that big, not very big for a big pregnant woman. I start filling it up with water from the shower and I climbed in it and tried to sit in this for like contraction and I was like, no, 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 never mind, that was a bad idea. I should send you a picture of this bin. It's like tiny. It's like pretty funny. Um
That's the logical thinking of a laboring woman. I love it. I think it's absolutely glorious.
Yeah. So funny. I'm like, I just want to be in a body of water.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, and then I think maybe like 2 a.m. I initially woke my partner and contractions started at 10:48 p.m. I woke him up then for a second. I'm like, okay, things are happening. Like, we might have to go soon. And like, but you could go back to sleep and stuff. So he slept for another hour. And then it just is like ramping up more and more. And the shower's not really helping me anymore. And I'm like, oh shit. I have to drive in a car for 2 hours. Like, oh, okay. This is, and also that not knowing what to expect when you're a first time mom. And I just, through my labor the whole time, I was like fearful of that the common thing that can happen that a woman's like, it's so intense. Like I must be like 8 centimeters dilated. And then they get checked, which we know doesn't mean anything. But, then they're 3 centimeters dilated and they're just like, you have so much time to go. And so that was like in my head a lot. And so I really told myself the whole time, it's going to get so much worse. It's going to get so much more intense. It's going to be so intense. So I had this like belittling the labor the whole time, kind of, because I'm like, it's going to be way gnarlier than this. Which is, I don't know, kind of an interesting tactic because I mean, it definitely was like, I don't know, made me cope with it a little better. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
yeah, good tip.
go. But yeah, and then it just got intense enough. I was like, oh, okay, like I better go. It better be time to go. And so I woke my partner up at 3 a.m. I was like, all right, we gotta go. Time to wake up. It's time to drive north. And we're getting like dressed and grabbing our couple things. And I'm like, running around doing stuff and like dropping to the floor and swaying back and forth through contractions as I'm like running around. And then I keep having to run up to the bathroom every few minutes. And I'm just like, how am I going to ride in a car for 2 hours? Like, I'm going to the bathroom every 5 minutes. Like, what is going to happen? And luckily, I guess I was just done after all those hours of going to the bathroom. Yeah. And then I guess, yeah, then we get in the car to go. And my friend is like sleeping in the downstairs. And I think she had like earplugs in and she just didn't wake up the whole time through all this. And yeah, so this very intense 2-hour drive in the deepest depths of labor, which was, in a truck and this bumpy, windy road, very intense. And, we start going and my partner's, like, we were trying to avoid this. We didn't want to do this. And I just have to be like, you stop. This is what's happening. It is right now. I'm in it. Like, just stay calm. This is what's happening. So like, don't like be like after the fact kind of thing. Um, yeah, I was very much like, "Don't ask me a question during contractions, like, come on." Um, and he's like, like, "Well, are you gonna have this baby today? Like, should I be driving fast?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I've never had a baby. Like, probably today, but maybe drive a little fast, but not around corners or not when I'm having a contraction. Like, drive slow when I'm having a contraction." It's so funny. And and yeah, I had to like vocalize and moan and use sound to be able to channel the energy while in the car before it was movement that was channeling the energy. That was one of my big things for coping with labor, just channeling that really intense energy that's coming through you. So yeah, a lot of moaning and vocalizing and this dance of trying to lean, you want to rest and relax in between contractions. And so leaning back and trying to really not anticipate the next contraction, but I had to notice it soon enough because I had to like switch my positioning and sit up and like hold my seatbelt farther away from me. It's a crazy dance. And yeah, so it was a very intense car ride. I think I was trying to call the midwives at some point, but then I was like in a contraction. I was trying to let her hear me moan to be like, "Okay, it's happening. Like, meet us at the birth center. We're driving fast." Um,
Yeah, that's crazy. Like a 2-hour drive in the thick of deep, active labor. Like you wouldn't wish that upon your enemy, truly.
mm, no, oh, so much. Yeah, and then towards the end of the drive, there's this like safety corridor. The speed limit's supposed to be like 55, and my partner's driving like 80 miles an hour, and we're on that spot. And then I notice I have a little nausea, and then yeah, being so educated about birth, which it's like beautiful and I could notice the stages, but I would also kind of my brain would tick on and I'd be like, "Oh, this is happening right now." And the speed of the labor too, learning about with you about how the longer you're in labor, the more the hormones build up to kind of let you be in labor land. And that was such this beautiful aha moment for me because I'm like, I didn't, I was in it and in my own world, but I wasn't all the way that often hear with like women in labor land. I didn't, it was too quick for me to build up all those hormones, I guess. So fascinating. But so then I had some nausea and I was like, oh, nausea, maybe it's transition. and, and then, the next couple miles, and then I have the first pushing contraction. And I'm just like, oh fuck, like kind of a little fear. but you get that adrenaline kind of rush that happens to transition, getting ready to birth your baby. So I really got like, oh my God, are we even gonna make it to the birth center? And we're very close at this point, like 10, 15 minutes away. Um, yeah, and then we pull up there like 5 a.m. Nobody's there, no midwives. I'm in a parking lot now, and I'm locked out of the building. And I think, yeah, they weren't there yet because they're driving the speed limit, and we're like speeding, being like, I'm about to birth this baby in a car. And my partner had it all worked out. Like, if a cop just tries to pull us over, like, I'm just gonna be like, no, you gotta just give me a police escort. Like, I'm not pulling over. I'm just trying to get there. Yeah, and then so I hop out of the car as soon as it stops, like finally out of the car. And then I bend over the seat and have this big contraction, and my water bursts, and it feels like a balloon pops inside of me. And then I reach down and I feel her head crowning right there in the parking lot, locked out of the building, no midwife. And I'm just like, oh shit. And so I just lay down on the ground in the parking lot, and my partner's throwing blankets and pillows under me, so I'm not just like on asphalt on the ground outside. And I'm like laying there being like, if I could just keep this baby in for a few more minutes. And luckily, kind of at that point, the crowning, sometimes there's like a pause, sometime in the transition or travel down. Um, Oh, right, and then the end of the drive when I started, the end of the drive when she was, like, traveling through the birth canal, although I didn't necessarily feel that sensation, I was, like, spinning circles on that seat, all sorts of like, I just felt like an animal, like, full animal listening to your body, but, like, in these crazy positions and just, like, all around moving through it, and that was, like, the dance with baby moving through the birth canal. So it's so
You're spiraling your baby down.
yeah.
Yeah, and for anyone listening, like Alexandra is a belly dancer, so you
Ooh.
definitely know how to move your body in spirals. And I mean, you know this already, but probably a lot of our listeners don't. Like belly dancing originated from birth dancing, like women coming together to belly dance to create the energy of spiraling the baby down, right?
Nice. I hadn't actually thought about that with like the spinning on the seat like I was, which is funny. Like I'm like got a seatbelt on me and I'm in this track and I'm going all over the place. Um, yeah, and definitely the belly dancing and just being a dancer, that awareness of my body and being used to stretching and moving in ways that just feel good, not that like you're told to be moving in. That definitely aided me a bunch in my labor.
Wow.
Uh,
And I love how you intuitively just were lying down on your, so you lay down on your side, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Just
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the pictures. There's a picture of me that I sent you in clothes on the ground, water on the ground. That's
just
that moment.
yeah, just to slow things down. I think that is so clever too. And it's just that primal, like knowing that, okay, I
Mhm,
don't actually want to give birth on
mhm.
the parking lot. I'm gonna do something about that and lying down to slow things down. Like, because you're not using gravity. I think being upright will make things go faster for sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Love that that was your intuition just doing that. It's
yeah.
amazing.
I'm like, was on my left side too, maybe, I think. Yeah, and then I don't know. I mean, that picture is from like 5:08, and then it was a few minutes of me laying there before the midwife got there. And then she she gets over and like runs across the parking lot and like, hey, just like, oh, like they're like kind of shocked and like, oh my gosh. And she's like, okay, you gotta get up and go in now. And I'm just like, I can't move. And her face is just imprinted in my memory, like, you have to. um, and then I got up, with like a head trying to come out of me. And my partner tried to pick me up for a second. I'm like, okay, never mind. No, 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 don't pick me up. That doesn't feel good. And then like, yeah, this time since I was laying down, I don't think there was any contractions. I had this pause then, which I don't know, my body because I needed to, if it was just a pause. But yeah, and then I waddled into that birth center. And I just strip all my clothes off as soon as I'm inside and crawl on the bed. And then it's like, my body, I didn't push consciously once. I just kind of breathed, grunted, moaned through it and having contraction and her kind of, coming in and out. And I was on my hands and knees on the bed for a little while. And then the second midwife got there, who was my main kind of connection one. She was just like, why didn't you call me? I was just like, I don't know, it was fast. Like, I don't know. And yeah, and then they're just like a little bit frantic, like computers and like, they're trying to pull out stuff and something ripped and fluff went flying everywhere and stuff. And like a little bit, and the lights were bright. So there was this kind of like, I mean, it was chill enough, but there was just a little bit hectic kind of, they're like, oh my God, a baby's coming out right now. That kind of energy. Um, and she's like, you want to get in the birth tub? I'm like, well, if there's time, like I'd love to. That was my birth plan. I wanted to birth in the water. And so she's filling up the tub, and then I get in like 16 minutes before I birth my baby. So I got my water birth, which was like the thing I got, which was nice on my birth plan. And the water was amazing, just the gravity and it holding you, and yeah, yeah, the weightlessness. And yeah, very slow dance of in and out like they do, come in and out. And I didn't push, and I was just breathing and consciously and trying to have it go slower because it was very intense. And that was probably the most uncomfortable part of the labor for me, is that opening beyond what you've opened before. And I thinking back to, I feel like had you been in one environment with the lights down low and it all calm the whole time, I feel, maybe that part of labor would have gone a little bit differently. But yeah, and there was a lot of pressure on my front, so I was putting some counter pressure on that, which I guess that can be more of a thing in water births too, the, more clitoral pressure. And yeah. Um, yeah, and then at one point the midwife was like, "You could like push your baby out, if you want to, like you can push kind of thing." And my partner's like, "Is this is happening soon, right?" And they're like, "Yeah, yeah," just giving him some comforting words and whatnot. But I was just like thinking as she tells me that, I'm like, push my baby out. I'm like, I'm not trying to rip. That is like tear. That is like one of my big things. I'm like really trying to breathe my baby out. I really don't want to tear. And I was kind of like, why are you telling me to do that? I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do that at all. And so I just kept like, very, slow. I mean, it was quick. It was like 40 minutes of the pushing phase, but I, was really trying to slow it down and breathe through it. So yeah, let myself have time to stretch. Um, yeah, utilized, the panting, kind of relaxed mouth, tongue out, not horse breath. Yeah, that panting when it was like super, super intense. And definitely, those contractions is like deep moaning sound when the pushing contractions are happening. And I noticed like in the videos, like my head is kind of like I'm doing rhythmic moving with my head along with the noises. And then the panting, it's like head going back and forth. you know? um, yeah, and then she was born. Yeah, it was, and then so she was born at 5:48 a.m. So first contraction at 10:48 p.m. Exactly 7 hours to the minute. Very
Wow.
cool. Yeah, fast, but 4 hours at home, 2 hours in the car, and the last hour in the parking lot and at the birth center. So like they were only there for like the last 40 minutes of my labor.
Yeah, crazy. And
Yeah.
when she did come out, did she just come out in one go, or did you birth the head first? Do you remember?
Yeah, the head first. And I was definitely like, go out. Some of my mutterings are pretty much like, go out, go out. It's like this intense stretching. But yeah, the head was out for a minute and then the rest of, not a minute, but, some amount of seconds. And then the body came out after. And my partner was like kind of trying to catch her, but a little unsure. And so the midwife helped. And then they just brought her to my chest right away. And she just had like this quick little cry for a second. Great tone and everything. She was, yeah, very, pink little baby. And yeah, and then she just calmed down like right away, and she's all woozled on, her arms are out, and she's just like so mellow and sweet and opening her eyes slowly. And yeah, that was that was the emergence.
Beautiful. And so, how long did you stay in the bath for with your baby? Did you get that kind of golden hour? Did you get left alone? Did you have a moment of bond? Did you birth the placenta in the pool?
I didn't. Yeah, I was in the pool for a little bit. I can't remember how long actually. I meant to double check with the videos that I have. And then, some of the first seconds there, I have this really funny video. And I'm just like, kind of parched and I'm like, in my mouth. And I'm like, and I talk in funny accents sometimes, just like silly person. And so I have this funny accent. I'm like, well, that hurt my stuff. And then I almost say fuck. And then I say frick instead because I'm not trying to say fuck after I just baby. And it's like really funny. I have this video. I should send it to you. It's super silly. Yeah. So I don't know, some amount, 10, 20 minutes in the pool. And then I still hadn't birthed the placenta and I moved to the bed. And gosh, you know what? Yeah, I meant to double check the timing. But yeah, the placenta, it wasn't, I had wanted, I can't remember if I tried to nurse her before birthing the placenta. I didn't have it like explicitly said in my birthing plan. And I think maybe, I didn't know all the things to kind of like really be like, this is what I want. And so it was a little like vague on what my ideas of what I wanted. And so I definitely felt like the placenta part was rushed. and I felt like I didn't have enough chance to like really catch my breath and fully integrate what had just happened. That was very fast and intense. And so yeah, they were like asking me to birth the placenta and like get up and squat, and it's hard to, it's a, the placenta is soft and squishy, but it's hard to be pushing something out after your uterus just pushed a baby out. For me it was. So then they're like asking you to cough, and they did a little bit of the tracted cord pulling, and yeah, that part felt rushed to me, and I felt like I didn't get to catch my breath all the way. And even though I had this beautiful birth and it wasn't exactly what my plan was, and it was amazing. I was high off of that birth experience for months. Um, and I just felt so powerful and badass. But yeah, that is the part of my birth that I like still feel, I have regret over, or I just feel like, a little bumness for it because that's not how I wanted. And I think it was kind of interrupting that golden hour. I think it was within that frame.
Mhm.
Um, but then after that, then it was like sweet baby on me, nursing, and yeah, and then we didn't cut the cord for like a long time. uh yeah, but that little interruption and
Mhm.
just letting it be, I'm like, probably would have been ready to birth it in some time.
I think this is it's just such a common story, though, that most women, even when you kind of are planning to have a natural birth, you don't count the placenta, or you don't, that's not a part of, for a lot of women. Some are even like, oh, I'm supposed to birth something else. Like for some, that's even not clear to them. And then,
Mhm.
and then it might not be communicated by the midwives either that well about the options. Maybe it's not even presented as an option that you can birth physiologically, that there's no rush. If you're not heavily bleeding, like that's a different scenario, right? But if everything is normal, then there really, it's not just like birth doesn't have a time limit. So it's the same with the placenta, but there's a lot of practices around the placenta needing to be birthed within the first like half an hour. Otherwise,
Mhm.
you should transfer to hospital, or you should intervene and all of these things. And so that's a pressure that's on midwives to try to protect and quote unquote their women from transferring. They then instead become the police of the placenta and kind of put that upon the woman. So it's good for everyone who's listening. That's really what I want to speak to, is that, if you're pregnant right now, that you really also think about, how do you want to birth your placenta? How do you want your first golden hours to be after birth? And really talk to your midwives about that. Communicate the way you want it to be. And so, I mean, it's a great thing that you brought up to illuminate that, you know, even for someone who, was a doula already, right? Who already had this knowledge, and also, that there was this, desire to maybe home birth or birth naturally, and still this wasn't kind of in the forefront of your planning either. So I really want to acknowledge that, because that's 99% of women, like truly, very few actually truly spend the time to plan their third stage, the birth of placenta, but also their postpartum, as an extension of that.
Yeah, and just protecting that golden hour is so important. Yeah, and now knowing, kind of dabbling with the idea of midwifery one day, or just, doing this mentorship and, trying to be a sacred birth worker, I understand, or I know more like the regulations around midwifery, and that they're also trying to protect themselves along with, their women. But yeah, so there is that aspect with regulated midwifery. And yeah, I think if I had been very clear about my wishes, they would have respected that. But when you have that kind of, you didn't have exact direction, they're just gonna do their protocol.
Absolutely. And that a lot of the times midwives, when they do these things, they're actually trying to protect the woman from the system.
Yeah, yeah,
But
totally.
in that become something that also is a hindrance or disturbance to a woman's sovereignty and her, full birth experience, so it's there's so much politics, as you know. I mean, we dive deeply into this in the mentorship, and you truly have a deep understanding about this now. But as a birthing woman, you don't, and that's why these discussions are so important for women who's listening to realize that you can have a beautiful, amazing midwife, but you could also be governed by something that might also trickle down through her trying to protect you from like transferring to the hospital, or
Yeah.
and also of course protecting her to not get, the witch hunt of midwives is real. So
Yeah.
beautiful. Okay, and then did you stay at the birth center for a while, or did you decide to drive on back those 2 hours back home to have your kind of postpartum?
Yeah, well, this was the day she was born on May 1st, was the day that I was in between Airbnbs from like 11 till 3. And so I had this next Airbnb, which was like a really, really nice magical place that I had for like a week and a half after my birth. Cause I was like, I don't want to ride in the car with the new baby, like kind of right away. I just want to be close by. The midwives can do their home visits. Like they're not going to come probably the 2 hours south. And yeah, I just really wanted that space up there. And I, didn't know when the baby was going to be born. And yeah, she was like right on time or like almost a little early. Um, yeah, so we just stayed there and took a nap and ate food and rested there for several hours. She was born, before 6 a.m. And yeah, and then by the afternoon, I think we were able to early check into our Airbnb, and then we went straight there and I had family support. And yeah, it was like really beautiful time at that place. So it's like really special place, like overlooking the ocean, this magical garden. It's really nice, like craftsman's built house. And yeah, it was really sweet postpartum time
Beautiful.
there.
Isn't that funny that she chose to come on that one night that you went home? It also it really goes to show though that, where you truly feel safe, which was your
Yeah.
home, where you truly feel comfortable, which was your bed, is
I
also
know.
where labor works best.
Yeah, I ruminate on like, okay, was I going to go into labor anyways then? Or did I want to go home so bad because I was about to into labor? Or once I went home, she was like, we were both comfortable enough to go into labor. And, it could be any of those things, I guess. But yeah, I really ponder about that and my really being like, I have to go home for a night.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So if you had a first-time mama in front of you right now who's about to have her first baby and she really wants to have a natural and empowering birth experience, what advice and pearls of wisdoms would you give to her?
Yeah. Like so ideally you can set up your birth team and your birth environment to be a space you feel like you can really release your inhibitions like fully all the way. um and like cultivating your intuition and honoring your wild woman during pregnancy will really like aid in this power to or in your ability to surrender to the power of birth and just listening to your primal instincts. If your body is telling you to move a certain way, then do it. And just really like for me, the big takeaways were like primal instincts and just, following that with your body. Yeah.
I love that so much. Thank you so much, Alexandra, for coming and sharing your birth story. I love having heard it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I also wanted to add in pregnancy, with all my knowledge of birth and just prep I'd been doing for years, reading stories and information. I knew about, the emotional, spiritual aspect of preparing for labor and like trying to clear any fears or things that might come up in labor. So that was like really big for me as I didn't want these to come up while I was in labor and having to face that or having it stall my labor. And so I did Jane Hardwick Collins' birth course when I was pregnant, and that like diving deep into those things really helped. So I just wanted to like shout out that. And Anna's got a beautiful natural birth course. So yeah, preparing with some stuff like this and not just, information and knowledge and birth stories are important, but there's, this deeper aspect as well.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, honey.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you love this podcast, then please consider sharing it, leave a review, or make a contribution on our Patreon page. And if you want to connect on social media, then find the podcast on Instagram as The Natural Birth Podcast. Thank you for listening.